Hello, here we go. My name is Kathy Unger and I'm going to talk about Boreal Caribou range planning, primarily in the southern NWT region. And I know this is a topic that isn't new to a lot of you. In fact, I bet several of you are part of one of the working groups or have been part of some of the community workshops. But nonetheless, I'm going to start off by providing a little bit of a background of what range planning is and why we are doing it. So, at both the federal and territorial level, Boreal Caribou have been listed as threatened in Canada, and these listings have led to the development of a national and a territorial recovery strategy. And these two documents outline measures that can be used to try to ensure recovery and delist these species. So both the national and territorial recovery strategy outline mechanisms by which Boreal Caribou habitat can be maintained and planned for, and this leads into the development of a framework for Boreal Caribou range planning in Northwest Territories, and this document was published in 2019. It's available online. And this is essentially the roadmap for how we are doing range planning in the Northwest Territories. So why are caribou threatened? Well, the short answer is habitat loss due to both natural disturbance, primarily fire, and human disturbance, so things like seismic lines or infrastructure projects, mining, things like that. And places with more disturbance tend to see population declines of caribou, and also disturbance leads to changes in the landscape and can lead to more predation of caribou as well. So recognizing that Boreal caribou habitat is a very important piece of the puzzle to caribou well-being, that's what range plans really focus on. They focus on managing these disturbances on the landscape to maintain adequate caribou habitat and to ensure that Boreal caribou populations remain healthy and self-sustaining for today and for the future. So this framework for range planning outlines how we do range planning in Northwest Territories, and first off, it describes that we should develop 5 regional range plans in the Northwest Territories. So that's what we're doing. We're making an Inuvialuit range plan, Gwich'in, Sahtu, Wakishi, and Southern NWT range plan. And the reason we're doing that is for several reasons. So one, these areas are humongous areas. Northwest Territories is very vast. The conditions that you find in each region differ. So in terms of fire frequency, the level of existing human disturbance is different depending which region you're in. And the groups such as Rainbow Resource Boards and Indigenous government organizations, so the co-managers that are involved in co-developing these range plans are different, and so each regional range plan needs to be tailored in a way that meets the needs of each of those regions. As I mentioned, range planning is a highly collaborative process and relies on the cooperation and involvement of many groups that are all involved in management of Boreal caribou. And this project is backed by federal funding, which largely supports the coming together of all of these groups in development of these range plans. So as I mentioned before, the overall goal of range planning is to ensure a healthy and sustainable Boreal caribou population across the Northwest Territories in a way that offers harvesting opportunities for present and future generations of people. Let me go back one slide there. So this is a good point in the presentation just to touch on the Wakishi region range plan. I just want to mention that of all the range plans, the Wakishi region is the most advanced It has a published interim range plan. You can find it on the ECC website. It was published in 2021, and it has details in there about how to implement management actions and the level of disturbance on a landscape, things like that in the plan. And it has a management class map that looks like this. And the reason I just bring this up, it provides a really good template of what we're working towards with the Southern NWT range plan. And I just want to break down a little bit about what these management class maps mean. So we have red, yellow, green areas, which represent intensive, enhanced, and basic management class areas. And those correspond both with areas that are regarded as high-value caribou habitats for boreal caribou specifically. Those are represented in those red areas, and those places that are in green generally reflect areas that are less important for boreal caribou. And so it's necessary to have more rigorous management actions directed at different development sectors for those areas that are regarded as more valuable for boreal caribou. So that's exactly what the range plans do. So, for example, oil and gas might advise that in enhanced and basic areas, nominations and bids just operate as normal, whereas in an intensive area, a management action would advise not opening up new areas in that area for nominations or bids, especially areas that are known to be sensitive, for example, used for calving. So that's how the management class map and distributions work. So getting right into the Southern NWT range planning updates, very, very high level, I wanted to describe the process we use in the Southern NWT. The range plan has been under development since 2019. That's when we established a working group for this region. There's been 8 working group meetings since establishment, a couple rounds of community traditional knowledge or indigenous knowledge workshops that mapped known areas of boreal caribou important habitats. Most recently, there was a working group meeting back this past November to continue development of the range plan, and I'll talk a little bit about SMARC-SAN and the 5 sub-regional meetings in just a minute. But where we are right now, let me just move my face again. So where we are right now with the range plan for Southern NWT is we're still working on a management class area map, and we're working to fine-tune the boundaries on that map, and we're writing the first complete draft of the range plan. We're aiming for completion of the Southern NWT range plan for early 2025. Okay, if I had little firecrackers here, oh I do. Here we go. So what I'm showing here is the draft SNWT range planning management class map in its current state after many, many years of work by many, many, many people, a lot of information books from Western science and from traditional knowledge. So I want to break down how we got to this point, but this is the main takeaway from today's meeting that I'm excited to share with everyone today. So let's move me again. This is a good spot. I'll break down the process, but this slide overall outlines a process of getting from a whole bunch of information that we need to consider all the way down to a single draft management class map, which, as I mentioned before, we're still working on fine-tuning, but I'm very proud of our group for getting this far. So first, we needed to know where on the landscape boreal caribou were going. So we could access the caribou collar data from over the years to figure out where we know caribou have been going and using the landscape. We also collected all of the data we could for fire history and human disturbance on the landscape, so places we know that are disturbed and not likely to be good for boreal caribou. And we can use that data to develop a model map called the resource selection function, which I like to call important caribou habitat map. So this is entirely based on Western science. There's been no traditional knowledge incorporated at this point to the mapping. But what this little map shows at a very high level is all those blue areas. Those are areas that are more likely to be selected by boreal caribou. Those are places that contain habitat and habitat features that benefit boreal caribou. And all those red areas, those are places that caribou are more likely to avoid. So they could be great habitat for other species, but they don't, they're not the choice habitats for boreal caribou. So in addition to where caribou are and where disturbances, there's a lot of land uses that we need to consider. So we wanted to know where protected areas are, existing draft land use plans, interim land withdrawals. These are all land uses that will influence how the final management class map looks and is used. So we combined that information into our planning. And then finally, we collected information about development potential from the forestry sector, oil and gas, mining infrastructure, and we actually developed a sort of estimate map of combined development potential. So a map that tells us where on the landscape is more valuable for development opportunities than others. So all of this information we used to wrap up into a tool called MarkSan. So MarkSan is, I won't go into it in detail, and this is all you're going to see with MarkSan, this little box, but it's a decision support tool that takes spatial information and helps simplify it for helping decision makers make decisions, essentially. So taking all this information, with the help of MarkSan, we created a number of management class map scenarios that are all a little bit different, but are all pretty good starting points for how to distribute this basic, enhanced, and intensive on the landscape. So we had a number of choices that we needed to look at. So through lots of discussion, eventually one scenario rose to the top. We call it scenario 3, and this scenario does the best job of prioritizing that high value caribou habitat in those red areas, those intensive management class areas, while at the same time prioritizing those areas with higher development potential in those green basic areas, meaning those are going to be more accessible for economic opportunities. So at this point, again, I just want to highlight that nowhere in this process have we yet brought in traditional knowledge, but here it is. So this teeny tiny map it represents something like, I think like 25 community meetings. So there's a lot of information that's been brought together in this single map. So don't be fooled by this little map in the corner here. It actually is the result of a lot of work of a lot of people, but it's up here in the corner on its own and not on this side of this process, because the working group very clearly was not open, or not, rather, didn't feel it was appropriate to take traditional knowledge, which is very different kind of knowledge than scientific data, Western science data, and they didn't feel it was appropriate to run it through this analysis. So instead, it was suggested that we hold these subracial meetings and look at the mapped information, and then through discussion we could make changes to the management class map that reflects the traditional knowledge of the Southern NWT. So 5 subracial meetings were held, and those meetings served to convene community members from individual communities and neighboring communities, so that they could see and talk about the shared data together, and share the information between communities. So through lots of discussion at these subracial meetings, eventually a single draft management class map was woven together. So all of this information was brought to the working group, and one draft management class map was made. So again, here we go. Little celebratory confetti. This is yes, I'm very happy to share this with everyone today. So again, here's the map, and I just want to dive into a little bit of work that still needs to be done. So this is the map in its current form that we are continuing to work on, but going forward we still have a few considerations to finalize with the working group and other stakeholders. So things like adding road buffers of basic area, making sure that we're allowing for things like people who use the roads to access wood for private harvesting can do so without any restrictions. Or often, you know, we might see cabins or gravel pits just off of roadways, and those are important uses that we don't want to limit. We also want to continue considering how forest management areas are going to be reflected in this sort of management cluster distribution. So we already made some changes in the Fort Providence forest management area, not enhancing, but augmenting the amount of basic that's in that area to make sure that planned cut blocks are free from those more stringent management actions. We had a lot of discussion around, you know, is there such thing as a patch that's too small? So a little single speck like this of intensive, is that really plausible for managing caribou in the landscape? So that's something we still need to flesh out in future working group meetings. And connectivity, so both the idea of connecting one red patch to another, but also how does this range plan connect to other range plans? So this is the Wakishi area that also has a range planning map. How do those areas connect to each other? So briefly, I would like to show you these colorful lines represent caribou movements over the years. So that's a tool that can help us see how caribou are using the landscape and possibly connecting from one area to another. And we can also look at neighboring range plans and see how well do the different management classes line up with other areas. So those are continuing discussions. One big discussion we had at the most recent working group meetings was how are we treating established protected areas? So that's Wood Buffalo National Park, Adege, a teeny tiny bit of Nahanni National Park here. And through discussion, it was decided that we would give those areas a separate category, the protected area category here in purple, simply because those are areas outside of the jurisdiction of GNWT, so any management actions that we put into a range plan cannot be applied to those areas, but they do represent areas that are, in a sense, protected or off limits to development opportunities, so those areas count towards the overall, I guess, higher management of undisturbed boreal caribou habitat on the landscape. So that was my high-level updates from Southern NWT. One more topic I want to mention before I go is the 2023 fire season. I'm sure it's been talked about a lot already at these meetings, but it's a big topic of interest in terms of range planning as well. So we have been looking at 2023 fire season footprint estimates and trying to figure out what that means for range planning, and also how that's changed disturbance levels on the landscape. So that's something I'm not going to get into, but we are looking at through various tools. And the final slide I want to share is next steps. We're going to need to have another working group meeting sometime next spring to continue making those adjustments to the management class maps, as I said, and hoping to have the first draft of the plan completed sometime in 2024 as well, and that will go out for review. Thank you so much for your time. Let me move my face again. Sorry I couldn't be there, but I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you.